So we go to the next story, which again involves our dear leader, Donald Trump. And it's the fact that it comes from The Guardian. And it reads, Trump says U.S. will boycott, or he has boycotted anyway. It says, will boycott G20 summit in South Africa, citing treatments of white farmers. Administration has long accused South Africans of allowing white Afrikaner farmers to be persecuted and attacked. Donald Trump said Friday that no U.S. government official would be attending the Group of 20 summit this year in South Africa, citing the country's treatment of white farmers. And it goes on that Mr. Vance has pulled out. But there's a part here that it's funny. The Trump administration has long accused the South African government of allowing minority white farmers to be persecuted and attacked as it restricted the number of refugees admitted annually to U.S. to 7,005.
I think your screen is blank. I don't think they can see the article.
Sorry?
Unless it's just on my end.
I think it's yours. It must be. Can you see it? Comrade, can you see it? Okay. I think it's your sister. So the Trump administration has long accused the South African government of allowing minority white African farmers to be persecuted and attacked as it restricted the number of refugees admitted annually to the U.S. to 7,500. The administration indicated that most will be white South Africans who will claim faced discrimination and violence at home. But the government of South Africa said it's surprised by the accusation of discrimination because white people in the country generally have a much higher standard of living than its black residents, more than 3 decades after the end of the apartheid system of white rule. Using that as an entry point, comrade, could you shed more light on that angle and then take it from there? Sorted. And so, let me share my screen. And again, it's the story about Trump boycotting. So, it reads, the government of South Africa says it's surprised by the accusation of discrimination because white people in the country generally have a much higher standard of living than its black residents more than 3 decades after the end of the apartheid system of white rule. So before the comrade comes in, anybody who is familiar with the history of South Africa would know that during apartheid, most of the lands were appropriated and given to white farmers. Okay.
Right. So they pointed out that the European South Africans have a much higher standard of living. But this is an opportunity where you start dropping stats and figures, And, because media are lazy, they're not going to go and do that research. So you have powerful handouts that you disseminate, whether at press conferences, you're handing it out, whether you're emailing it to them. So, for example, a story like this, you should always mention the fact that 30 plus years after apartheid, the 8% still own 72% of the land. You have to mention that all the time. So where is this land confiscation coming from? Where? And people, when they hear, okay, they own 72%. So things are bad for Black people in South Africa. They own 28%, which is terrible because they make up 80% of the population. Well, guess what? They do not own 28%. They own 4% because the other land is to South Africans of Indian ancestry, or what they call the so-called colored people of mixed race. So 80% of the population, Black, own 4% of the land. 8% of the population, European, own 72% of that. That needs to appear in every story related to issues like this. And then the other thing they should have said is that the European South Africans who are complaining and supposedly seeking asylum in the U.S., you need to examine their head, because European South Africans have a higher standard of living than European Americans. The per capita income of European Americans is about 50,000. South African, European South African is 60 plus. And these are all statistics, probably more like 70,000 now. And then the final thing that you pointed out was the neglect of the Black population in South Africa and in the US. So whereas the European population in South Africa, the per capita income, as I said, all statistics was in the 60s, now could be in the 70,000s. The Black population, the per capita income is 7. In other words, European income is 10 times more. That's just income per capita, right? We're not talking about accumulated wealth through the centuries of apartheid. And then finally, they should have asked the question, what are you doing for your own African-American population? That's 2 years after the Emancipation Declaration, right? In this country, the European per capita income is 50,000 plus. For the Black population, is 30,000. That's what I should have said if I were in South Africa's position.